For weeks, my son Daniel ignored my calls. Every voicemail I left, every text I sent, read but never replied to. I tried to brush it off at first. Teenagers are busy, right? But the silence continued. Days turned into weeks. Something felt wrong, something I couldn't put my finger on. I tried everything to get through to him. His phone was always on, but the calls went straight to voicemail. The unease in my chest grew heavier. It wasn't like him. I had to see him. I couldn't just sit and wait anymore. One afternoon, when Daniel wasn't answering his door, I decided to walk into his room. I had no intention of snooping. I only wanted to talk to him, to understand why he had been shutting me out. When I entered, the familiar smell of his room hit me, a mix of old books, laundry, and faint cologne. My eyes quickly scanned the mess, and then, beneath the bed, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Box. It was hidden, almost deliberately placed out of sight. I froze, my heart pounding. What was Daniel hiding? And why? I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. The box was small, old, and locked. It was buried under a pile of clothes and dust, almost like Daniel didn't want anyone to find it. For a moment I thought about leaving it alone. But curiosity gnawed at me. Why was it hidden like that? What could possibly be so important that he would go to such lengths to keep it from me? My hands trembled as I picked it up, feeling the weight of it in my palms. What was inside? A million thoughts ran through my head, each one more disturbing than the last. Could it be something illegal? Drugs? Was he involved in something dangerous? Or worse, something that would shatter my image of him? I tried to focus, calm my racing thoughts. I had to find the key. Where would it be? In his drawer? His closet? I scoured the room, looking for anything that could unlock the mystery. As I searched, the questions piled up. What had my son gotten into? And why hadn't he said anything to me? After what felt like an eternity, I finally found the key. It was hidden in the back of his desk drawer, carefully tucked between old papers. My heart skipped as I walked back to the box. I didn't know whether I wanted to find answers or whether I was too scared to know what was inside. I unlocked the box, and when I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. Stacks of cash. That's what I saw first. It wasn't much. Maybe a few $1,000s. But that wasn't what shocked me. What made my stomach drop was the letters. There were several of them, each one addressed to Daniel, each written in a shaky, unfamiliar handwriting. I picked one up and began to read. The words on the paper chilled me to the bone. The letters were full of fear, regret, and dark confessions. Someone was in trouble. Someone had been using my son. And I was certain Daniel had been keeping secrets. Big, dangerous secrets. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I needed to know what was going on. I called Daniel into his room. When he walked in, I could see the fear in his eyes. His face went pale when he saw the box in my hands. His usual confident demeanor was gone. "What is this?" I demanded, holding up the box, showing him the contents. His eyes flickered between the letters and the money. "Mom, I can explain," he stammered. He moved to grab the box from me, but I stepped back. "No, Daniel. What's really going on here?" The silence hung heavy in the room. He was avoiding my gaze, his hands fidgeting nervously. Whatever he was hiding, I could see it in the way he acted. It was no longer just about the box. It was about trust, the trust between us that had suddenly and frighteningly seemed to vanish. Daniel broke down, his voice trembling. "It's not what you think, Mom. I got involved in something. It's not bad. I'm not a criminal." I could hear the lies in his voice. He claimed he had been in debt, trying to make things right. The money was just temporary, he said, a way to get back on track. But why didn't he tell me? Why keep it hidden for so long? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. If it was just a temporary fix, why was he lying? Why had he kept this secret from me? "No, Daniel. This is bigger than that," I said, my voice shaking. "What have you gotten into?" He stood there, staring at the floor, refusing to meet my gaze. The truth was beginning to sink in. This wasn't just about money. It was about him keeping me in the dark, about him pushing me away when I should have been his ally. I felt betrayed, my heart heavy with a mix of anger and sorrow. How had we gotten here? How had things gone so wrong? This was my son, the child I had raised with love and care. How could he have hidden something like this from me? The mother in me wanted to forgive him. I wanted to tell him everything would be okay, that I'd help him fix it. But the reality was different. I didn't know if I could trust him anymore. What had happened to the boy who used to tell me everything? But in that moment I knew something had to change. I couldn't just sweep this under the rug. He needed to face the consequences of his actions, and so did I. But the hardest part was still to come, whether I could truly forgive him and rebuild the trust that had been shattered. I didn't want to just take Daniel's word for it. I needed to know the truth. So I started looking. I went through his phone, checked his emails, and even reached out to his friends. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Daniel had gotten involved in a shady investment scheme. At first, it seemed harmless, some kind of get-rich-quick plan that promised big returns. But as I dug deeper, I realized just how deep Daniel had fallen. These were dangerous people, and they had pulled him into something that could ruin his life. I felt like I was losing control. How could my son, my smart, thoughtful son, have gotten so caught up in something so reckless? I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I called my husband to tell him everything I had discovered. His reaction, however, wasn't what I expected. He didn't seem concerned, not the way I was. "He's old enough to handle his own mess," he said coldly. "Don't get too involved." I felt a wave of frustration. Was this the man I married? How had we become so disconnected from our own child? There was no warmth in his voice, no sign of the father who used to be protective and involved. It was as if he had already given up on Daniel. I hung up, feeling completely alone. How had we gotten to this point? Sure. Here's the continuation of the story, following the structure and keeping it suspense-filled. After several sleepless nights, I finally confronted Daniel with everything I had found. I could see how much he was struggling, how deeply ashamed he was. He took a deep breath and finally began to speak the truth. I didn't want you to know, Mom. I didn't want you to see me like this. But the truth is, I've been borrowing money from some people. People who don't take no for an answer. It started out small, but then I thought I could turn it around, make it all go away. I was wrong, Mom. So wrong. His voice trembled, and for the first time in weeks, I saw my son not as the rebellious teenager, but as the scared young man he truly was. He wasn't just in financial trouble. He was in way over his head. And I realized then that my son was no longer the boy who trusted me to solve his problems. He was trying in his own way to figure it out on his own. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, looking at the ground. "I never meant for things to go this far." My heart broke. He wasn't lying to hurt me. He was lying to protect me. But how could I protect him now? "I know I've messed up, Mom," Daniel said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I can't fix this on my own. I need your help. If you just loan me some money, I swear I'll pay you back. I'll do anything." I looked at my son, my heart torn between the motherly instinct to help him and the reality that this was no longer just about money. It wasn't about saving him from his problems. It was about teaching him how to face them on his own. "I can't just give you money, Daniel," I said, my voice firm. "This isn't something you can just buy your way out of. You have to face what you've done. You have to learn from this." He didn't understand. "You don't get it, Mom. Can't lose everything. I just can't." But it wasn't just about the money. It was about his choices, his decisions that had led him to this point. And I realized that, for the first time, I had to let him face the consequences of those choices, even if it meant losing him for a while. After a long, sleepless night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to bail Daniel out, but I would help him take the first step. I found a financial advisor, someone who could help him create a plan to pay off his debts slowly. I also enrolled him in a program to address his financial habits, something that would force him to confront the mess he had created. He resisted at first, angry and frustrated. "You can't fix everything with a few programs and some guy with a calculator," he yelled. "You don't know how deep I am in this." But I refused to back down. "I'm not trying to fix everything. I'm trying to teach you to fix yourself, Daniel. You need to learn responsibility. You need to learn that life doesn't just hand you a way out." I wasn't sure he was ready for this kind of change, but I wasn't backing down. He had to learn to live with the consequences of his actions, whether he liked it or not. Daniel's resistance grew stronger. "This is stupid," he shouted one night, throwing his phone across the room. "You don't understand, Mom. You can't just fix everything with a few phone calls. I'm done with this." I stood there, heart pounding, feeling helpless. I had spent so long trying to shield him from life's hardships, but now I saw that I had to let him face it, no matter how hard it was. "You're not done, Daniel," I said firmly. "You can't just walk away from your problems. You have to take responsibility for what you've done. I won't let you destroy your life." But despite my words, he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, feeling defeated. How long could I wait? How long before he was ready to accept the help he so desperately needed? Days passed, and still I couldn't get in touch with Daniel. He stopped answering my calls, and the silence became unbearable. Each day that went by without hearing from him felt like another crack in our relationship. I kept leaving messages, but no response. The anxiety gnawed at me. I was losing him. Every voicemail I left, every text I sent went unanswered. My own son had completely shut me out, and I didn't know how to fix it. I was desperate to understand what was happening inside his head, but he wouldn't let me in. I had tried everything, but nothing was working. I feared I was losing him for good. Then one afternoon the doorbell rang. It was Daniel. He stood there, looking exhausted and defeated, like a shell of the boy I used to know. "I've messed up, Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've lost everything. Can I come home?" I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of the child I once knew. This wasn't the arrogant teenager who had shut me out. This was a young man, broken and ready to face the consequences of his actions. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment he realized he couldn't do it alone. "Come in, Daniel," I said softly. "We'll figure this out together." I didn't know how, but somehow I knew we had taken the first step toward rebuilding our relationship. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time I felt a glimmer of hope. I set up a meeting with the financial advisor, and Daniel reluctantly came with me. We sat together as the advisor laid out a plan. Slowly but surely Daniel would start paying off his debts. There was no quick fix, no magic solution. It would take time and effort. But it was a start. I watched as Daniel looked at the advisor, listening intently for the first time in months. For the first time he seemed willing to learn, to really take responsibility. The small victories felt huge. It was a difficult journey ahead, but seeing Daniel take that first step made me believe, just a little, that maybe we could get through this. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of progress and setbacks. Daniel started keeping up with his payments, even took on extra work to make ends meet. He wasn't perfect. There were days when he would slip up, get frustrated, or miss a payment. But each time he picked himself back up, and that gave me hope. Every small win felt like a victory. The road was still long, but for the first time I could see Daniel truly trying to change. Just when I thought things were looking up, Daniel hit another roadblock. One of his creditors threatened to take legal action. He was devastated, pacing around the house, feeling like everything was slipping through his fingers again. "I can't do this anymore, Mom," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "I've tried everything, but it's just not enough." I could feel the panic rising in my chest. But I knew I couldn't let him give up. "You've come so far, Daniel. You can't give up now. This is your chance to prove you can handle this. You've worked too hard to let it all slip away." He nodded, slowly but surely finding his determination again. I had to believe in him, even when it felt like everything was falling apart. That night, Daniel made the hardest decision of his life. He called the creditor, negotiated a plan, and somehow managed to make it work. The relief was palpable, and for the first time in a long time, I saw pride in his eyes. He wasn't just taking responsibility for his actions. He was learning how to fix them. "I did it, Mom," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I actually did it." And in that moment, I knew that Daniel was finally ready to take control of his life. After Daniel successfully negotiated with the creditor, something shifted inside him. The fear and panic that had plagued him for so long began to dissolve. He wasn't just a victim of his circumstances anymore. He was taking control. That night, he sat across from me, a sense of pride in his eyes that I hadn't seen in months. "I never thought I could do it," Daniel admitted, his voice quiet but full of determination. "But I did it. I'm not going to let myself fall back into old habits." I could see the real change in him. He wasn't just following a plan. He was living it. The road ahead was still difficult, but for the first time I believed he was ready to walk it. As I watched him take responsibility for his future, I felt something else: relief. It wasn't just that he was making progress, it was that I was finally seeing the son I had hoped for all along. The journey wasn't over, but this felt like the turning point. Daniel had made the choice to change. After weeks of Daniel making steady progress, I felt it was time to reach out to the rest of our family. I told them about what had been going on, how Daniel was slowly turning his life around. Their reactions were mixed at first. Some were skeptical, others unsure whether they could believe in his efforts. But when they saw the hard work he was putting in, when they saw how determined he was, their attitude began to shift. They started offering support, small gestures at first, encouraging words, helping with advice. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like we were finally coming together. We weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time in a long time I could see hope. Daniel wasn't just surviving anymore. He was growing, and so was our family. Just when I thought we had turned a corner, Daniel faced another setback. It wasn't anything huge, but it was enough to knock him off course. He skipped a few payments and slipped back into some of the old habits I thought he had overcome. He seemed to distance himself again, retreating into the same behaviors that had caused so much trouble in the first place. I tried not to panic. I knew setbacks were part of the process, but this one felt different. It felt like all the progress he had made might unravel in an instant. I could feel the frustration building inside me, but I refused to give up on him. "You can't quit now, Daniel," I said, trying to stay calm. "You've worked too hard to let everything fall apart. You have to keep going." He looked at me, guilt in his eyes. "I messed up, Mom. I don't know if I can do this anymore." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe in him, but it was hard. Felt like we were back to square one. Daniel's relapse came to a head when he lost his job. It was a wake-up call that I couldn't ignore. I sat down with him, my heart heavy with the weight of the truth. The financial planning, the hard work, the steps he had taken. None of it mattered if he couldn't stick to the plan. "I love you, Daniel," I said, my voice firm but filled with emotion. "But you have to want this for yourself. You can't fix everything. You need to take responsibility, or you'll lose everything." For the first time, Daniel seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. The reality hit him hard. He had to make a choice: change or lose everything. His eyes filled with tears as he realized the truth in my words. "I don't want to lose everything, Mom," he whispered. "I just don't know if I can keep going." This was the moment. The moment he needed to take full responsibility, and I had to let him. There was nothing more I could do. It took time, but Daniel finally found the motivation to get back on track. He found a new job, something that wasn't perfect but was a start. He started taking his financial situation seriously again, and slowly he began paying off his debts. It wasn't easy. Some days were harder than others, but Daniel kept going. He wasn't asking for help anymore. He was doing it on his own. The most important part was that he was no longer relying on me to fix everything. He had finally taken ownership of his life. I watched him grow stronger with each passing day. He wasn't the same boy who had hidden things from me. He was becoming a man who understood the importance of his actions. Months passed, and Daniel kept his promises. His debts were finally paid off, and he had repaired his relationships with the family. More importantly, he had started helping others who had been in the same position he had been in just a few months ago. I could hardly believe the transformation. Daniel was no longer the reckless teenager who had made bad decisions. He was someone who had learned from his mistakes, someone who was giving back. I had watched him go through hell and back, but now I saw a son I could be proud of. The journey had been long and painful, but it had been worth it. My son was back, stronger and wiser than before. As I stood in front of him, watching Daniel take charge of his life, I realized the true victory wasn't just about paying off debts or making money. It was in the person he had become. We weren't just family anymore. We were partners in life, sharing the ups and downs together. The bond between us had been tested, but it had only made us stronger. I had learned that life isn't always about making the right decisions from the start. Sometimes it's about the journey, about learning from mistakes and having the courage to start over. Together, Daniel and I had faced the darkness, and we had come out the other side stronger. It wasn't just the end of his struggles. It was the beginning of something new. A new chapter, one where we were no longer just mother and son. We were two people working together to build a future that was now filled with hope.